live in a Maccabean world. Therefore, we need a heavenly Hanukkah helper. We live in a Maccabean world. The way the world was back then is very much the way the world is becoming around us right now. We live in a Maccabean world. Therefore, we need a heavenly Hanukkah helper. It's real. Back then, they tried to change the law of God by using the culture of man. That same thing is taking place today. Antiochus Epiphanes was a descendant of Alexander the Great and his kingdom. Epiphanes, he took for his name because it means God is manifested through me. He wanted people to believe that he was the expression of God, and he wanted to unify the world under himself. He also wanted to glorify the Greek culture which Alexander had extended from India all the way over to Egypt. And so this world culture, when we make tables, when we made tables before plastic became so common, we started with wood, and then wood became too expensive. So they took sawdust, they mixed the sawdust together with glue, they made boards out of it, and then they put a veneer of plastic wood over the top, so it made a table that was glued together, a lot of pieces with a veneer on the top. Are you familiar with the tables I'm talking about?
Yeah.
We've all had them. Now they've been replaced to a large degree by plastic, but that's the way it was. And that's what Antiochus Epiphanes tried to do to the world. He wanted to take everybody from everywhere, glue them together, and put on a veneer of his culture, the Greek culture, young people going to gymnasiums, young people being athletic, young people having philosophical arguments and debates, and standing against the laws they had stood for. Notice that when this process took place, it started off peacefully. It was very peaceful, and that's the same thing that's happening in our culture. Infinite number of peoples are coming in because we have the welfare state. We have the benefit state. And they quietly come in, they quietly become a part, they quietly join what they are, and things appear to be very, very peaceful while they've got their hand in our pocket. It appears to be very peaceful. You'll notice Muslims move in peacefully. They've always moved in peacefully. They move in peacefully and everybody gets along fine. And then when they are strong enough, when they are more than half, when they have gotten a superior position, when they have gotten embedded in the community, then they suddenly become radicalized. They suddenly become rulers. They suddenly start pushing and shoving and demanding and fighting for their own. If you pay attention, when there are riots anywhere in the world, the newspapers will say it was a youth riot. In Germany, it was a youth riot. In France, it is a youth riot. In Amsterdam, it's a youth riot. In New York City, it is a youth riot. But when you read to the bottom line, the bottom paragraph of the story, you find out that all the youth who moved and radicalized and rebelled and rioted, they are all Muslim, with a few Americans who are joining along, trying to find some kind of purpose or peace for their life. You see, I believe we live in a Maccabean world. And the same thing is happening to us. And we're ignorant enough that we don't know what is happening. Notice how peaceful it was during the 80s, during the 90s, during the 70s. OPEC, the oil-producing nations. Now, I want to point out, God gave Israel the 12 tribes. He said, you have the blessing of the Holy Land. You have the blessing of Yeshua. You have the blessing of Messiah. You will find and found Western civilization. You will create the most prosperous civilization the world has ever seen. That was the blessing that he gave to Israel, to Judah, and the 10 tribes. But he also gave a blessing to the 12 princes who were the sons of Abraham by Ishmael. Because Abraham told Ishmael, go east. Get out of the Holy Land, go east. And he sent him to a bunch of desert. He sent him to a bunch of islands. He sent them to a bunch of locations that really seemed to have nothing until the last days, and suddenly they discovered they had the biggest oil well in the entire world. What is the United Arab Emirates? Nothing but an island with an oil pump. What are these nations? They are the oil-producing nations of the world. They united back in the 1980s, and they spent billions and billions and billions of dollars reaching into the West. They spent billions of dollars taking college and endowing chairs of education in great universities so that they could push their programs, so they could push what they were doing. You see, we live in a Maccabean world, just like the Maccabean culture. They took all of their money and they invested it in ways that gave them control of the means of the culture. I want to point out to you how peaceful this was. During the 1970s, 1980s, they had something called boycott, divest, and exclude. BDE, BDE, BDE. They pushed this in all the universities. They pushed this. What it meant was boycott Israel, divest from anything that is involved in Israel, and exclude Israel from the economic process going on. And they used their billions of dollars of oil money in order to do this during the 80s and the 90s. They didn't want to divest from the telephones that were invented in Israel, from the pharmaceuticals that were invented in Israel, from the electronics that were invented in Israel, or for the nuclear power that was invented in Israel. They wanted to buy all the best of stuff, but they pushed BDE, BDE, BDE. And then, during the 90s and the 2000s, they had another program that they pushed, diversify, equity, and inclusiveness. Diversity, equity, DEI. Diversity, equity, inclusiveness. Diversity, equity, inclusiveness. When you study diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, are you all familiar with this?
Yes.
I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But what it meant is that Jewish people did not fit into society. What it meant, now get this, white men did not fit into the culture that they built. Christians did not fit into the culture that they had created. You see, that's why I say we live today things have not changed because we live in a Maccabean culture. It's the same kind of thing on a different level that Antiochus Epiphanes wanted to do, to put a veneer on everything and make everybody the same so that he can conclude. It was peaceful. Now, when these groups, these minority groups, become strong, when they become strong enough, then they become violent. It's inevitable that will happen. When they become strong enough. In ancient Israel, Antiochus Epiphanes took and he tried to convince all of the upper class people to put their kids in their schools, in their gymnasium, in their athletic clubs. He tried to get them to put all of them in. And when that didn't work, they sent in armies and started to kill and started to cause all kinds of murder, robbery, trying to destroy the culture, trying to destroy the religion, trying to destroy what was going on. And that's what it came to. Now, when we look at our culture, there are 5 or 6 ways that this violence is starting to come out. There are 5 or 6 ways that it takes place for this violence. The first one we've all heard about, you simply ram a car into a crowd. You simply ram a car into a crowd. That suddenly becomes a weapon of mass destruction. Now, does that mean we ban all cars?
No.
Does that mean we get rid of all cars?
No.
See, you take something common and turn it into a weapon. A car into a crowd becomes a terrible weapon. Or they use bombs made from chemicals that you can buy in Walmart, chemicals that you can buy anywhere, or shootings. We've recently heard of a father and son who went into a beach and started shooting. If they don't have a culture where they can get to guns, they get knives. And we've heard of a dozen people getting harmed, killed, sliced up with knives, or just plain rioting. Young people going in, going wild, turning everything on its ear. See, what I'm saying is we live in a Maccabean world. Things are not that different now from what they were. They're much, much the same. If you have been paying attention, in Amsterdam, they had a riot.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, heavy.
Simple riot going on. In Australia, on a beach, 15 died. 30 were killed by 2 people. The most amazing thing about it, and the reason I say we live in a Maccabean culture, the Prime Minister of Australia got on and he spoke about it. He said how terrible it was. He mentioned that it was because there are guns in our society that it happened, and they need stricter gun laws, even though they've got the strictest gun laws in the world. He never once mentioned Islam, never once mentioned Muslims, never once mentioned radicalization. He completely ignored what the problem was, and he talked about everything around the issue. You see, we live in a Maccabean culture. That's why we need a heavenly Hanukkah helper to come into our lives, to come into our culture, to come into our country, and to help us. In Europe, they have traditions called Christmas carnivals. They had them in all the big cities in Europe. They'd have a giant carnival. They'd have all kinds of rides and games and food. And they had all of this going. In Germany, they shut them down because of the rioting that was taking place there. France has shut down their biggest event of the year, which is a New Year's Eve festival. They will not have it in France because France says they cannot guarantee the safety of their own people, because those who have immigrated and come in have come in order to cause harm and danger. See what I mean? We live in a Maccabean culture. Denmark, exactly the same thing.
And Germany too.
And Germany.
And Norway.
And Norway.
And England.
Yes.
And England. Everywhere where they try to have Christian events,
Yes.
they are stopped by rioting. That's what takes place. What happened? Well, what happened in Hanukkah was that the temple became so polluted because he slaughtered a pig on it. Now, I don't necessarily think Antiochus Epiphanes knew what he was doing and he just slaughtered a pig because God in the Bible said, don't eat it, it's unclean. I think he actually, when worshiping Saturn at the Saturnalia festival, the 25th of December, the animal that was sacred to Saturn was the pig or the wild hog or the wild boar because they're so tough. They can live everywhere, they can live anywhere, they can live off anything, they can do any of this. And so they took and they sacrificed it to their God in God's temple. And God said, the temple is too dirty, it's no good, I'm going to move out. And all of the religious priests, the real ones, the ones that were holiness people, moved out and they went away. They could no longer work there. And a man named Matthias Maccabee, Matthias was the father, he had 6 sons. He went to a small town called Moadin, and he said, I will live here my own life, I will just ignore it, I will just move away from what they've done there. He tried to make peace by moving away. We have people trying to make peace moving away in our culture. And it doesn't work because we live in a Maccabean world. What they did is they developed altars on carts that could be mobile, and they would take them to all these towns, and they would say to all the people that if you will worship here, you will be part of the new culture, you will become part of the new world order. And so one of these false priests came to Matthias and he said, Matthias, you're a powerful man. The people look to you, your children. If you will take and sacrifice this on this altar, then your children will be allowed to go to the best schools in the country. They can go to Brown University. They can go to Harvard. They can go to Yale. They can go to all the schools that are well endowed, and they will get good educations, and we will pay for their educations. They get absolutely the best. All you have to do is slaughter this. And he took and he raised a knife to slaughter on that altar. Matthias took the knife, cut the man's throat, stabbed him, and threw him on the altar. He threw the false priest on him. Needless to say, that was not well received. And he was driven out, and what he had to do, he had to go to the desert. He had to leave and go to the desert, and he had to hide in the desert to get away from the people. And what happened when he went to the desert, this was an amazing thing, because as Matthias and his 6 sons went into the desert, as he went there, what happened was holiness people started going to him. They started following him. They started going where he went. They left society in order to keep the holiness and the purity that they had. And what's happening in America? Well, there's this group that is really looked down upon and torn down and really spoken very badly about, called MAGA. Make America Great Again. And it's funny, because the first time I heard a powerful man speak on that topic, make America great, I thought, that's too simple. That can't possibly be a theme that people will catch on. That can't possibly be a theme that's going to capture people's hearts. It's going to grab the country and going to move. Boy, was I wrong. That became a theme which consolidated and brought people together because they love this country. They know it's God's country. They know that Yeshua, Jesus, has blessed this country. He brought it into being through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's 12 sons. We know that this is the case. And it's amazing because the people who left World War II and went to Israel, they went to Israel because they wanted safety, they wanted security, and they thought if they had a state, they would have safety and security legally, and they thought they would have an army and they would have it physically. And yet you discover that without Yeshua, nothing works. Nothing works. Matthias got pushed to the point where he had to fight. His sons got involved. An army coalesced itself around himself. And Matthias got killed. Have you noticed all the conservatives getting killed in our culture, in our country, in our day and age? See, I believe we live in a Maccabean society. And there is a subtle push to try to destroy all of those conservative people who hang on to the values of God. Matthias and his people originally fought with farm implements, with sledgehammers, with rakes, with hoes, with pitchforks. And they started winning and they kept winning, and they started winning and they kept winning. And every time they'd win a war, they'd pick up all the tools that the enemies that they defeated had, and they got swords and bows and spears and real weapons. And they became powerful, and they captured and they started to fight, and they started to take off. I want to point out that the enemy back then was not Antiochus Epiphanes, and the enemy now is not a particular political party, no matter how bad it looks. The enemy back then and the enemy now is Satan, who is trying to destroy the kingdom of God by destroying the law of God. He wants to get rid of this. He wants to destroy the people of God. He is the enemy of what God does. And he is the one who wants to destroy. They came up with a battle plan against Matthias. They said, we're going to attack on Sabbath because he's a religious man and he can't fight on Sabbath. So they attacked on Sabbath, and these people couldn't fight. And what happened when the people couldn't fight and they attacked on the Sabbath? They lost. And then somebody thought, this is kind of stupid. Because if we lose, we're going to die. Our kids are going to get killed. Our faith is going to be gone. Ourselves will not be there to stand. So we had better decide we will fight on the Sabbath if we have to in order to save and preserve our God and what we're doing. And they made a commitment that they would fight on the Sabbath in spite of what the enemy was doing. And so, would you believe, would we believe, would I believe, God allowed them to win? This little army was allowed to win. Matthias got killed. Judas, the hammer, Maccabee, got killed. Most of his brothers got killed. But they won, and they got Jerusalem back. And the first thing they did when they got Jerusalem back was try to purify the temple. This is where we finally get to Hanukkah. Now I'm going to talk about what I'm talking about. Now I'm going to tell you what you already know, what you came here for. And that is the miracle of Hanukkah. The miracle of Hanukkah is that God can fill an empty vessel. There are times when I feel like an empty vessel. And I draw strength from the fact that God can fill an empty vessel. God can use an empty. If you ever feel like an empty vessel, remember Hanukkah, because God can fill an empty vessel. God can use it, and he can fill it, and he can make it spill over. It really is very, very important what God can do with Hanukkah when Hanukkah becomes you. They took and they wanted to cleanse the temple. And they had 1 day's worth of oil, and they needed 8 days worth of light. By faith, they started. Now, I've heard an awful lot of rabbis start poo-pooing Hanukkah at this point. They say it wasn't really a miracle, it didn't really happen, it's not really important. They talk about what the Jewish people did. They talk about what happened when they survived, but they miss the point that this was a miracle of God.
Nes gadol haya kan.
I don't know what that means.
Nes gadol haya kan means a great miracle happened
Amen.
here.
Amen. And I do believe that this was a miracle. It was the miracle of life. And the reason I believe it was a miracle, because in John 10, verse 21, it says that Jesus went to the Feast of the Dedication in the winter. Yeshua showed up at the temple for this because he knew how important this was. He came to the dedication of the feast. He honored the dedication of the feast with his presence. He taught on Solomon's porch where all the teaching took place. He didn't go into the temple. He actually stood in Solomon's porch where the visiting rabbis would teach, and he taught, I am the light of the world. He who comes to me shall not walk in darkness. If you have me, you have the light of life in you.
Amen.
Boy, do I need to believe that. Boy, do you need to believe that. Boy, do we need to believe that the meaning of Hanukkah is God can take an empty vessel through the light of Yeshua. He can fill you, he can use it, and he can bless you through that.
Amen.
Jesus observed Hanukkah. How important that is. The important thing about the light of Hanukkah is in the back of all of these, there is an extra candle called the Shamash candle. And not only did Christ teach that he was the light of the world, but he taught that if you want to reflect God, if you want to be God's servant, if you want God to work through you, you have to be a servant to give Yeshua's light to everyone else. If you will become a slave, a servant, give yourself to Yeshua so that his light can light you, and then your light can light others. And what will happen is the world around you will be lit. That's what Hanukkah is all about. That's the meaning that Yeshua gave when he came to Hanukkah. Now, there's something that most people don't know, and this ties into Christmas, so I'm going to share it with you. When Jesus said, I am the light of the world, there was something that they were doing in the temple. And they had 2 giant brass pillars. They were empty. Brass is a mixture metal of tin and copper, and it has a very high melting point, 2,600 degrees. It can stand a lot of heat. So they would take these 2 pillars, and they would take the robes of the priest. Now, priests didn't only have a pretty robe to look nice. They did a real job. They sacrificed up to 10,000 cows, 10,000 sheep a year. They did the hard work of putting it up, cutting it off, cleaning it up, removing the innards, removing the skin, taking the meat. That was hard work. They did the butchering of 10,000, and these were the robes that they wore. They'd wear the robes to do the work, and then they would take the robes and they would bleach them with a very strong caustic soap to cleanse them, and they would wear them and use them again, then they would wash them again, then they would use them again, then they would wash them again, then they would use them again. It really was very hard work, and they did this with the robes of the priests till they practically fell off of them. And then, at this time in Hanukkah, they would take these 2 big pillars that they had. They would fill the pillars with all these robes that were practically falling apart from the priests, where they couldn't be washed, couldn't be worn anymore. they would take these and they would cover them with oil. They would just soak the whole thing in oil and they'd light it. And you get this giant flame coming out of these two pillars that they had set up. And this light could be seen 20, 30 miles away. Because it was on the top of a hill, it'd go 30 miles to the horizon, and you could see the light there of the temple shining. And Yeshua said, I am the light of the world, as these pillars were pouring out their light to the community around there. Now, this is important to Christmas, and I'm going to tell you why. What they called those robes, when they put them in there, are swaddling cloth. Swaddling cloth. Mary was the cousin to Elizabeth, who was the wife of Zachariah, a priest. So Mary went for 3 months from January to March to watch Elizabeth deliver John the Baptist so she could learn how to deliver a baby. So she, in the fall, at a sukkah booth, could deliver Yeshua. And she took with her the robes that Elizabeth gave her, and they wrapped the child in swaddling cloth. He was a priest from the moment he was born. And here you see how Hanukkah becomes ultimately important. And I want to point out that if the temple had not been cleansed, if the law had not been fulfilled, if the law had not been straightened out, Yeshua could not have been born in Bethlehem. He couldn't have come because for him to be sacrificed on the cross, he had to be the Passover lamb who was put to death by the high priest of Israel. For it to be a complete sacrifice, he had to die on the cross, and the priest had to lead the people to say, crucify, crucify, crucify. And so that's what happened to Christ. Without Hanukkah, there could be no Christmas. I want to point out how I learned much of what I know about Hanukkah, because I was a nice little Lutheran boy, and I didn't know anything about Hanukkah. And then Diane was working for a Jewish lady who ran a bingo hall. And the lady wanted to have a Hanukkah Christmas party. And so she said, Pastor, would you preach on Hanukkah? Well, I didn't know anything about Hanukkah. I had no idea what Hanukkah was all about back then. So what I did, this little Lutheran boy, took and I went to the Catholic Bible. I got myself a Catholic Bible, because in the Catholic Bible they made sure that they put the Apocrypha, Maccabees, in their copy of the Bible. And there's a reason for that. The Roman Catholic Church did exactly the same thing Antiochus Epiphanes did to the church. They removed the law of God so they could fit in the culture they knew in Rome from Babylon. And so when God judges that church, he will use their own Bible, because the book of Maccabees tells exactly what they've done. Our God has everything nailed down. He has everything under control. We live in a Maccabean culture. It's taken place right around us all the time. We live in a Maccabean culture, but we have the hope of a heavenly Hanukkah helper, Yeshua HaMashiach, the light of the world. Amen. Now we're going to close with lighting the Hanukkahs, so that you can sit here in the dark for a few minutes and just think about Jesus as the light of the world.